Yes, we have some leaders that need to do better. But we also equally have a lot of leaders who are doing very well in Africa. Let's take, for example, a country that I like to speak of, Rwanda. Rwanda, yes, some might say President Kagame has overstayed. He needs to go. But let's look at 23 years ago. Rwanda was in genocide. 23 years later, Rwanda is one of the most well-run countries in Africa. Rwanda is the only country on earth with 64% female cabinet.
Are they elected or appointed?
Elected. No country comes even close. There are a lot of good news coming out of Africa. Let's take a situation like Rwanda. Then others might say Kagame needs to go. But precisely because Kagame has done incredible work in Rwanda.
This is the journey to One Africa.
It's very difficult to look at the issues to do with Africa and apply all of them to the whole continent. Mm-hmm. Different regions, different countries, the issues are different. I'm not going to oversimplify here, but let's look at Africa as a family. Let's break it down to your own family. Born of the same mother and father, mm-hmm. and yet we are so different. And me, as a mother of 5, how I approach one child is going to be different from how I approach the other child. There are a lot of good news coming out of Africa today. And let me remind our audience that we cannot continue to paint Africa with the same old raggedy brush, because there is change in Africa. Yes, we have some leaders that need to do better. But we also equally have a lot of leaders who are doing very well in Africa. Let's take, for example, a country that I like to speak of, Rwanda. Rwanda, yes, some might say President Kagame has overstayed. He needs to go. But let's look at 23 years ago. Rwanda was in genocide. 23 years later, Rwanda is one of the most well-run countries in Africa. Rwanda is the only country on earth with 64% female cabinet.
Are they elected or appointed?
Elected. No country comes even close. There are a lot of good news coming out of Africa. Let's take a situation like Rwanda. Then others might say Kagame needs to go. But precisely because Kagame has done incredible work in Rwanda, that's precisely the reason why the African leaders have appointed him to lead the reform process at the African Union. Why? We have a member of the family who's getting it right. So why should we get rid of him? Instead, we need to say, whatever you have done for other countries, for your people, we want you to also help us do the same thing for the rest of the continent. I'm saying what works for Rwanda may not necessarily work in the DRC, may not necessarily work in Zimbabwe or in Egypt. The issues of Africa are multifactorial, and we need to address them from one country to the other. However, we also have this general understanding of what is expected of the people, hence Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is a program agreed upon by all heads of states after consultation with the citizens of the continent. And we're now down to the 7 aspirations of the African people. That's the yardstick through which the African leaders are measuring their progress in their countries. Are we there yet? No. But it is a process. The fact that our leaders are coming together and meeting twice a year, reporting to President Kagame about the progress in their own countries, that is huge. When you look at a continent of 55 countries, that's no easy task. That is a tall order. But we have to start somewhere. it was refreshing for me to sit and listen and be part of the African peer review mechanism where the leaders were getting up and giving progress, self-analysis in their own countries and giving themselves a failing grade in terms of their progress in their own countries based on the 7 aspirations of the African people. It is a conversation. This is a path. We have started. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
I see.
The African leaders meeting twice a year, discussing progress in their own countries. That is the beginning. They have taken the first few steps, and we can't continue to pull Africa down. Let's talk about some of the successes. Let's talk about some of the good news coming out of Africa. Are we there yet? No. Do we have issues? Absolutely. But the conversation has started, and I think we are on the road, on the right path with the African Union. And to me, it is refreshing with what I know and what I've seen to see the African leaders coming together and articulating that which is needed in Africa and making a commitment to do better. Yeah, he touched on a lot of issues that I would like to address. First of all, I do agree with you, with Professor Naidu on the boundaries that were imposed upon us by our colonial masters. And it might also, it's quite refreshing to let you know that the African leaders have committed to melting the boundaries. Regional trade as well as intercontinental trade is the only way that we can survive as African countries. So they are fully aware of that, and efforts are underway to encourage regional as well as continental integration. It is a must, and that is the only way Africa can become self-sufficient, one. Secondly, to answer Dr. Naidu's question as to when is the African Union going to be able to sustain itself. Now, beginning January of next year, the African Union is going to impose a 0.2% tax on all the goods coming into Africa. That is more than enough to cover all the expenses of the African Union, 100%. So yes, we are working towards the African Union being self-sufficient, and the African Union must be self-sufficient. There is no reason why we should continue to get in excess of 75% support from the European Union and other organizations. So we are on the right track to being self-sufficient. And so January of next year, we should see ourselves in a different place. Back to continental trade. I was just reading statistics on power. Mm-hmm. If Africa were to connect the existing power lines today, we would increase access to power by at least another 30%, and in the process save billions of dollars by simply connecting the power lines that we have today. Mm. We have countries that are net exporters of power. Why aren't we importing to our fellow Africans? We have countries that are net importers, and yet we're all exporting outside Africa while other countries are importing inside Africa. Mm. The African Union, the leaders are talking. This is the platform through which the leaders are beginning to say, this insanity has got to stop. It makes no sense. We have everything we need as the continent.
But a lot of these countries do not even pay their annual dues.
We're working on it again under the leadership of President Kagame. That situation has improved significantly, believe me.
Do they sincerely know that there is a saying that whoever pays the piper calls the tune?
We're very much aware of that, which is why the push is towards self-sufficiency. The push is towards melting of the borders that are not our borders. And the African Union leaders are in agreement that the only way for Africa to survive is through integration. We don't have a choice. It is just that simple. What better platform do we have than the AU? Let's look at it. Our problems are even deeper. Shaka, you know as much as I do, even here in the United States, try uniting the diaspora organizations. Our problem is the mind. Colonization. Each and every one of us, we need to ask ourselves an honest question. Am I colonized? Because me, if I am colonized, it doesn't matter what position you give me. My thinking is going to be colonized. My voting is going to be colonized. My decision-making process is going to be colonized. So we have to liberate ourselves. The mind is still in shackles.
So if I hear you correctly, basically what you're saying is that first and foremost, we really need fundamental changes in our attitudes and mindsets.
Bingo. Absolutely. Because that is the biggest problem. Even in this country, I was talking to one of the ambassadors. They are diaspora organizations that are sitting on over $100,000 because they cannot agree on how to spend that money.
Because they don't interact.
They don't interact. So if we're having issues interacting in our neighborhoods as Africans, can you imagine what a monstrous task it is to bring together the 55 countries and speak with one voice?
No taxation without representation.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
So we have issues that we need to address even on an individual basis. And also, because when we look at how difficult it is just for us to loosen the shackles that bind us, the shackles that keep me from getting along with my neighbor and my sister, extrapolate that to the continent. It is no easy task, which is why even at the AU levels, they meet, they discuss, but I can tell you we are heading in the right direction. It is a tall mountain to climb, but we are on the right direction. I think that is the issue. You are dealing with an entity that represents the continent, and yet the countries are sovereign nations. So recommendations could come from the AU. Let's look at the situation right now in DRC and the elections. We got a situation in Burundi. Of course, the African Union is leading the discussions to make sure that there are going to be elections in those countries. But at the same time, these are sovereign nations.
Yes.
And so to the best that they can, the AU is playing a pivotal role, trying to bring African solutions to African problems. It is not easy. But I have to say, we should take the issue in Gambia. That was a perfect example of what type of role the AU is playing in Africa. They're using the same approach in the DRC, in Burundi. So it is a process, it is complicated, but to the best that we can, the AU is our best choice.
You talk about DRC. What about the fact that when you cross the river, you have Congo-Brazzaville, which just changed the constitution in order for Sassou Nguesso to become a life president. You have Rwanda, which has done the same. You have Uganda, you have Angola, you go to Equatorial Guinea, where you have the longest, leader, Teodoro Obiang. You have Cameroon, you have all those places sincerely. And yet, there is something that you have done so well. You do not accept to do business with any country where somebody seizes power through AK-47. Why don't you also make it the same condition that you, as a president, frankly, who swears to defend, protect, and abide by a constitution, you cannot change that constitution for personal or political reasons, really. We do not do business with you. Why don't you do that?
That's precisely what's happening in the DRC. The hope is that that constitution will not be changed and that elections will be held.
So why didn't you do it with Rwanda, with Brazzaville, with Kampala?
Back to what I said, it's a complicated process. The journey of 1,000 miles. This is one step. We have successes in some countries and not so successful in some countries. But in the final analysis, all the leaders agree what should be done in Africa, and we're working towards that. No, I'm in agreement with you. We do need to do better. Some countries need to do better. However, without the African Union, those conversations would otherwise not take place at all.
Thank you.
This is the journey to One Africa.